He stood on stage, the lights were hot, the air was thick with expectation. This was Las Vegas, 1970, it was the New Kingdom, but he was still its unproven king. He had been away for a long time, not physically away, but culturally. He was a ghost from another era. A black and white memory in a world that had exploded into color, and now he was back. Really back. Not just on a TV screen, but in the flesh. Night after night. The pressure was immense. Every show felt like a test. A trial. Could he still do it? Did people still care? Did he still have the magic? He worried about it constantly. He needed a sign. He needed to know this comeback wasn't a fluke. Then came the song. It wasn't one of his. Not a classic rocker, not a deep blues cut. It was a cover, a big, open-hearted ballad. He started performing it in his show, and something happened. The way the audience reacted, the way he felt singing it, it was different. When the live recording of that song became a massive hit, he was floored. He told people close to him it was a miracle. He truly believed it. He wasn't being dramatic. To him, the success of this one particular song was proof of something divine. It was a message, a confirmation that he was on the right path. But why? Why this song? Why did its success feel like a miracle to a man who had already had more hits than anyone could count? To understand his belief, you have to understand where he was. You have to go back. You have to see the prison he had been in for nearly a decade. The 1960s were supposed to be his. He ended the 1950s as the biggest star the world had ever seen. He was more than a singer. He was a cultural event. He was danger and excitement and rebellion all rolled into one. Then he went into the army. And when he came out, the plan was different. The plan was movies. Hollywood. The Colonel, his manager, saw a simple formula. Make a movie. Release a soundtrack. Sell millions of both. It was safe. It was profitable. And for a while it worked. Money rolled in. But something else was happening. The world was changing. And he was not changing with it. He was stuck in California making the same movie over and over again. He'd be a race car driver, or a boat captain, or a pilot. There would be a few silly fights, some pretty girls, and a handful of forgettable songs. The songs were the worst part. They were written to order, they had to fit the plot. He was singing about clam bakes and yoga, he was singing to children and animals. This was the man who had sung Heartbreak Hotel, the man who had shaken the world. Now, he was a product, a brand, and he knew it. He hated it. He would sit in his mansion in Bel Air watching television. He saw what was happening outside his gilded cage. The Beatles arrived, then the Rolling Stones. And Bob Dylan was writing poetry that defined a generation. The music was getting louder, smarter, more political, more personal. It was the sound of a revolution, and he was singing to the clam. He felt like a joke. He was getting rich, but he was losing his soul. He lost his edge. He lost his confidence. The fire that had once burned so brightly was down to a flicker. He was isolated. Surrounded by his guys, his Memphis Mafia, but he was lonely. He felt irrelevant. He would tell his friends, I'm so tired of this. I'm so tired of this music. I'm not proud of it. This was his wilderness, a desert of bad scripts and mediocre songs. He gained weight. He grew bored. He took prescription pills to sleep, to wake up, to get through the day. He was trapped by his own success. The Colonel had him in a golden straitjacket. No touring, no television, just the movies, because movies were controllable. Touring was risky. The turning point was 1968. A television producer named Steve Binder had an idea. He wanted to do a Christmas special. The Colonel agreed. He imagined Elvis in a tuxedo singing Christmas carols. A nice, safe, family-friendly show. Binder saw something else. He saw the fire that was still there, buried deep. He talked to Elvis, he listened to him, he realized this man was hungry, he was desperate to be taken seriously again. To be an artist again. Binder pushed him, he convinced him to ditch the safe Christmas format. He said, this is your chance, you can show them who you are. The result was the '68 comeback special. It was raw, it was electric. Dressed head to toe in black leather, he looked lean and dangerous. He wasn't acting, he was performing. He played his old hits with a passion nobody had seen in years. He wasn't a movie star, he was a rock and roll singer. He was himself. The show was a massive success. It was a resurrection. It reminded the world, and more importantly, it reminded him who Elvis Presley was. The King was back, but a TV special is a one-night event. The real test was what came next. The Colonel, seeing the renewed interest, booked him into the newly built International Hotel in Las Vegas. It was the biggest hotel in the world, and Elvis was to be its first headliner. This was a huge gamble. In the late 1960s, Las Vegas was not the cool place to be. It was where old-timers went to play their hits for tourists, Frank Sinatra or Dean Martin. It was the entertainer's graveyard. For a rock and roller, it was a death sentence. It was the opposite of Woodstock. It was safe, it was established, it was everything he had just escaped from. He was terrified. He hadn't performed live in front of an audience in 8 years. 8 years. An eternity in pop music. He had nightmares. What if he failed? What if they laughed at him? What if he was just a nostalgia act? So he went to work. He put together the best band he could find. James Burton on guitar, a legend. Ronnie Tutt on drums, a powerhouse. Jerry Sheff on bass. He called in the TCB band for taking care of business. He rehearsed them relentlessly. For weeks they worked in the heat of a Vegas summer, shaping a new sound. It wasn't just oldies, it was a full-blown rock and roll spectacle. He added a full orchestra. He added 2 gospel-style vocal groups. This was going to be big. Opening night was July 31st, 1969. The showroom was filled with celebrities, press, and high rollers. The tension was unbearable. And he was backstage, pacing, chain-smoking, convinced it would be a disaster. He was so nervous he could barely speak. Then he walked on stage. The place erupted. And for the next hour, he gave the performance of his life. He was powerful, he was funny, he was vulnerable, he was in complete control. It wasn't a comeback, it was a conquest. He had conquered Las Vegas. The shows were a phenomenon. They sold out every night. He was the biggest star in the biggest city of entertainment. He was breaking attendance records, he was earning more money than he ever had before. He had done it, he was back on top, but something was still missing. He had reestablished himself as a live performer. But he hadn't had a truly massive, defining hit record from this new era. The 68 special had given him If I Can Dream, a powerful statement. His sessions in Memphis had produced Suspicious Minds, a brilliant, complex song that went to #1. But he needed something that captured the magic of the Vegas shows, something that proved this new chapter was as vital as the first one. In February 1970, during his second run of shows in Vegas, he was still tinkering with the setlist. He was always looking for new material. He wanted songs that meant something to him, songs that let him use his voice, which was now richer and more powerful than ever. He decided to add a new song to the show. It was a song written by a man named Baker Knight. It had been recorded a few years earlier by another singer, Ray Peterson. It had been a minor hit, nothing huge. It was a good song, but it wasn't a guaranteed smash. The song was a ballad, a very direct, emotional statement. The lyrics were simple. They were about gratitude. They were about being supported by someone when you are weak. When you stumble, when you fall, when you're low, there is someone there to pick you up. Their love gives you strength. It makes you more than you are. He connected with those lyrics on a profound level. Think about his journey, the wilderness of the 60s, the feeling of being lost and irrelevant, the self-doubt, the fear. He had stumbled, he had fallen, he felt like he had lost himself. And who was there to pick him up? The audience, the fans. They were the ones who watched the 68 special. They were the ones who bought the tickets to Vegas. They were the ones screaming for him every night. Their love, their adoration was the fuel for his resurrection. He felt it was their belief in him that made him strong again. When he sang the words of the song, he wasn't singing to a single person. He was singing to every single person in that room. He was singing to his fans around the world. He was thanking them. There was another layer, too. He was a deeply spiritual man. He was raised on gospel music. He believed in God. He read spiritual books constantly. He was always searching for meaning. The lyrics could be read as a secular love song, but they could also be read as a hymn. A prayer of thanks to a higher power. When you're lost, God is there. When you doubt, faith is there to lift you up. The unconditional love described in the song mirrored the divine love he had sung about in church since he was a boy. So, when he stood on that stage at the International Hotel and sang this song, it was more than a performance. It was a testimony. He didn't just sing the notes, he inhabited the words. He started it quietly, almost like a confession. His voice was soft, vulnerable. When I'm weary and my heart is beating low, you could feel the truth in it. You could hear the memory of the long-lost years. Then, as the song builds, so does his voice. The orchestra swells behind him. The backup singers come in, like a celestial choir. He pours all of his power, all of his gratitude, all of his relief into the performance. It becomes an anthem, a declaration of faith. Faith in love, faith in his audience, and faith in God. The version that became the hit single was recorded live during one of those shows. You could hear the room, you could hear the energy. It wasn't a sterile studio creation. It was a moment in time captured on tape. A man on a stage pouring his heart out, and an audience receiving it with open arms. The record company decided to release it as a single. It was an unusual choice. The live recordings were not often big hits, and this wasn't a rock and roll song. It was a huge, dramatic ballad. But the magic of that live performance translated through this. The song was a monster hit. It went to #1 in the United Kingdom and was a top 10 hit in the United States. It was played all over the world. It became one of the signature songs of this new phase of his career. This is why he called it a miracle. It wasn't just about having another hit record. It was about what kind of record it was and how it became a hit. First, it was a miracle of validation. The success of this song proved that his comeback was real and complete. He wasn't just a nostalgia act, trotting out his old songs. He was a contemporary artist who could still create new, relevant hits. And he did it with a song that showcased his greatest instrument, his voice. It wasn't about the hip shaking anymore. It was about the pure emotional power of his singing. It proved he had successfully transitioned from a young rock and roller into a mature, commanding performer. Second, it was a personal miracle. The song was his thank you note to the world, and the world's embrace of it was the reply. It was the universe telling him, we heard you, we understand, and we are still with you. For a man who had felt so lost and alone, this was an incredibly powerful affirmation. He had bared his soul, speaking of his own weakness and his need for support, and instead of being rejected, he was celebrated for it. It healed a deep wound in his psyche. Third, and perhaps most importantly for him, it was a spiritual miracle. He didn't pick an obvious commercial hit song. He picked a song that felt like a prayer, a song that spoke to his own spiritual searching, and it became a worldwide smash. To him, this could not be a coincidence. It felt like divine intervention. It was as if God had put the song in his path, allowed him to deliver it with such passion, and then rewarded his faith by making it a success. It confirmed his belief that he was on a blessed path, that his talent was a gift from God, and that his return to the stage was part of a larger plan. He had been through the darkness, he had been humbled, he had been forced to confront his own irrelevance, and he had fought his way back, not just with talent, but with hard work and a leap of faith. The success of this song was the culmination of that entire journey. It was the sound of his rebirth. It was the sound of a man who had been saved. When you feel you've been saved, you don't call it good luck. You don't call it good timing, you call it a miracle. It was a miracle because an unlikely song, recorded live on a Vegas stage, connected with millions of people. It was a miracle because its message of gratitude and redemption was exactly what he felt in his heart. It was a miracle because it came at the precise moment he needed it most, solidifying his return and calming his deepest fears. He had conquered the world once with rebellion and raw energy. Now he had done it again with humility, grace, and a voice full of soul. He was no longer just the king, he was a survivor. And this song was his anthem of survival. The song was The Wonder of You.